Hey guys, tonight we are curling up beside a Shona fire in southern Africa, just you, a storyteller, and a sky that never learned to rush. You're surrounded by the slow clatter of insects, the gentle scrape of logs, and the kind of darkness that hugs your ankles. You're not here to speak, though. You're here to listen. A ring of seated elders leans in quietly, their bodies relaxed, but their ears, those are alert. Somewhere, a fire cracks in its sleep. A tale is about to begin. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Feel free to drop your location and local time in the comments. I always love seeing where you're tuning in from. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You feel the coolness of packed earth under your thighs as you settle down with everyone else. The mat beneath you is woven from reeds pulled from the Save River, still smelling faintly of clay. Firelight dances off the cheeks of the storyteller, who's wrapped in a faded blanket printed with sun symbols, the edges worn silky with age. They clear their throat not because they need to, but because tradition insists that stories don't sneak up unannounced. Insects chirp louder, as if they've been waiting for this moment too. A log splits with a soft crack. The storyteller begins not with words, but with a pause so heavy it feels like another person has joined the circle. You're instantly transported not to a new place, but to an old rhythm. This part of the evening is sacred, not religious, necessarily, but sacred in the way you might call your favorite blanket sacred, or the sound of someone humming through a chore they've done for 50 years. It's the firelight hour, the language of hush. And in the Shona world, storytelling isn't a job, it's a responsibility, passed down like a well-oiled axe. As you blink slowly into the flames, the storyteller begins by naming the time carré carré, long ago, very long ago. The phrase alone signals the unlocking of imagination, like flipping open a diary nobody has touched in generations. From there, the narrative flows effortlessly, like river water over stone. In Shona villages, especially before the whir of phones and generators, the evening fire was the original movie theater. You didn't choose a channel, you chose a lap to lean on. And you didn't just hear a story, you became it. A child crouched in front of the fire might very well grow up to be the cunning hare or the foolish hyena, depending on how the community saw their spirit. One mainstream historical fact here. The storytelling tradition in Shona culture isn't just casual entertainment. It served as oral law, spiritual guide, and moral instruction. Stories reinforced etiquette, explained seasonal cycles, and passed down knowledge from one generation to the next. Think TED Talk meets fairy tale, but with 100% more goats. The storyteller now draws a circle in the dust with a stick, a motion as rhythmic as the slow swish of their voice. That line, that spiral, it's more than decoration. It's a symbol of the narrative journey round and round, never quite ending where it began. You may wonder, is this just folk stuff? But anthropologists still debate whether some of these stories are embedded maps, coded histories of migration, environmental changes, or tribal conflict. Historians argue whether these tales were only myth, or if they secretly carry the DNA of real events. Wrapped in metaphor and sung into memory. One curious detail that stands out tonight before starting. The storyteller reaches into a small pouch and tosses a pinch of ash into the fire. not to feed it, but to quiet it. The fire must not speak louder than the tale. They whisper. You watch as the flames simmer lower, nodding like they understand. Then, the storyteller does something unexpected. They laugh, not at a joke, but at a memory. This tale, they say, came to me the way rain comes to a roof unexpected, and from a cloud that didn't look like much. That line earns a ripple of soft laughter from the elders, and a yawn from a toddler curling up on her grandmother's lap. You look around. The night has fully arrived. Frogs are tuning their throats like orchestras. The wind plays tag with banana leaves. The scent of roasted peanuts and wood smoke mingles in the air, a kind of edible lullaby. This moment, just this, is already a story. You're in it. You're living it. 100 years from now. Someone might say, long ago, very long ago. Someone sat quietly by a fire and listened without asking what time it was. You might be the hair, or the dust, or maybe the quiet fire. You shift slightly on your mat as the flames settle into a soft rhythm, not so much flickering anymore as sighing in place. The storyteller leans forward, just enough that the shadows on their cheeks deepen, and begins again. There's no rush. Shona storytelling isn't a sprint. It's more like weaving a very long scarf in the dark, one careful thread at a time. Tonight, as always, the matriarchs take their places first. These are the grandmothers, great aunts, widows, and wisdom bearers of the village. Each one finds her mat not by designation, but by intuition. Some sit cross-legged, others with legs stretched forward like roots from an old tree. Their faces are maps creases, dimples, and the occasional gold tooth that flashes when they chuckle unexpectedly. One of them, with skin like warm bark, rubs snuff between her fingers as if massaging memory. In front of them, the children, a full spectrum of eyes wide open, trying not to blink and miss a word. A few still wear their school shirts, buttoned up to the collar even though they've kicked off their shoes. The little ones cling to older siblings. One boy is holding a clay whistle. He doesn't know yet that blowing it mid-story is a capital offense, punishable by side eyes from 4 grandmothers at once. Behind the children, the middle generation finds their places: parents, uncles, aunts. They are quieter, not because they don't care, but because they know this part is not theirs to lead. Their job is to hold space, pass bowls of roasted maize, and nod at the right moments. This ritual of sitting down in order is more than formality. It's a hierarchy of listening. In Shona tradition, seating patterns reveal everything: respect, responsibility, and sometimes passive-aggressive feuds about who still hasn't returned that cooking pot from last week. Sitting out of order would be like trying to sing the middle of a song before the first note possible. Sure, but deeply suspicious. The storyteller, now settled fully into their rhythm, begins a tale that everyone in the circle knows, but no one dares interrupt. It's not just about what's said, it's about how it's said tonight. The same story can change flavor, tone, or even moral, depending on what the village needs to hear. One night, the tale of the greedy jackal might end with exile. Another night, redemption. It's oral jazz. Here's your historical fact for the night in Shona society. Oral storytelling was traditionally the domain of elder women, though men often participated through music or dramatic gesture. Grandmothers were seen as the best custodians of communal memory, since they'd lived long enough to forget some things twice and remember them better the third time. One of the grandmothers tonight, she's called Mai Chipo. interrupts briefly to correct the storyteller's use of a word. Just a single syllable, no drama, but it earns an approving murmur from the audience. You might not notice it, but in that moment, a story passed through 3 generations and came out sharper on the other side. Now, let's take a quirky detour. Did you know some Shona elders carry tiny carved figurines in their cloth wraps? Little animals, people, sometimes just shapes. These aren't toys or charms, they're memory aids. A lion-shaped piece might remind someone of a proverb. A zigzag shape might hold a riddle. You'd never know by looking. But a grandmother's cloth could be a portable archive. Basically, an offline, encrypted storytelling app. Meanwhile, the children start to shift. Some leaning on elbows, others blinking slow. But even the half-asleep ones are still listening. In Shona cosmology, dreams are part of the storytelling cycle. What you hear tonight may visit you in sleep, but in different clothes. You feel it too. The weight of stillness, the softness of warm breath and firelight. It's like the whole village has agreed to exhale in unison. But not everyone is convinced. A small debate is murmured between 2 of the middle-aged listeners behind you. Something about whether this version of the story is too modern. They whisper. That part about the talking goat, did elders back then really say that it's a familiar quarrel? Historians still argue whether some folk tales were continuously retold across centuries, or whether each generation just made things up and pretended their great-great-grandfather started it. The academic term for that is selective memory, and it happens to the best of us. Tonight's story is winding down. The hare has tricked the lion. Again, the maize has been stolen. Again, the villagers laughed. Again, but you smile anyway, because this wasn't about surprise. It was about rhythm, familiarity, repetition, a kind of comfort you don't realize you needed until it curls up beside you like a cat made of words. As the storyteller trails off, another elder mutters, "The hare always gets away," not out of criticism, but because some things in life are refreshingly predictable, like the fact that the child with the whistle still hasn't learned not to blow it. Another grandmother raises one eyebrow, and the child drops it into their lap, like it's suddenly made of fire. The fire itself seems smaller now, quieter. The logs are less ambitious, and you're warmer, calmer. You can already sense that this night will stretch long and soft. The kind of evening that makes tomorrow seem like someone else's job. You lean back slightly, your shoulder brushing the person next to you. Nobody minds. Tonight, you are a thread in the mat, a whisper between 2 names. You're exactly where you're supposed to be. A new sound joins the mix. Now not words, not fire, but music. It starts faintly, like someone humming into a calabash. Then it sharpens into rhythm. The storyteller draws out a small wooden instrument wrapped in faded cloth, its surface polished smooth by countless thumbs. It's an mbira, you might know it as a thumb piano, but here it's not just a novelty. It's breath, it's heartbeat. It's the voice of memory itself. As the first notes trickle out, you feel them more than hear them. They're soft, metallic, watery, like someone dropped sound into a pond, and it started to ripple. The mbira doesn't sing so much as swirl, and in this moment, it doesn't perform its summons. Each metal tine on the mbira is a note, but also a thought, a wrinkle, a ghost with good manners. The elders nod slightly, not in tempo, but in time. Time as in the past, not the beat. You lean in. One child rests their cheek on an uncle's knee, lulled by the spell of soft cycling music. Historically, the mbira has been more than just an instrument in Shona culture. It's been used in healing rituals, courtship, farming ceremonies, and tonight's purpose storytelling. Certain tunes are associated with specific stories. The melody tonight is slow and low, like rain sneaking through a tin roof. You don't know the tune, but your body acts like it does. Here's a mainstream historical fact you can chew on gently. The mbira Zavadzimu, literally mbira of the ancestors, has been played in southern Africa for over 1,000 years. Its resonant, cyclical melodies are said to connect the living to spirits, especially during mbira ceremonies when families invite ancestors to advise them in dreams or trance. And yes, someone in this village can absolutely play mbira well enough to lull a spirit to sleep. The storyteller strums a soft pattern between lines, using the mbira not to fill space, but to stretch it like they're folding time into a softer shape. With each loop, the story deepens. You don't just follow the tale, you sink into it. Tonight's story is about a young girl who could hear the stars. That's not a metaphor. She claimed that stars whispered real secrets, especially the ones who hadn't yet fallen. The village didn't know whether to be impressed or afraid so naturally. They did both. Her father, a herder with too many goats and not enough patience, tried to plug her ears with cotton, but the more he blocked out the world, the louder the stars got. Eventually, she started passing their messages to the village, mostly harmless things. The maize will grow crooked this year, or the hippos are feeling dramatic again. But then she told one villager his wife was keeping secrets in her cooking pot. That didn't go well. Now, here's your quirky tidbit. Some Shona communities once believed that dreams heard while an mbira was played had special clarity. It was said that if you fell asleep during a mbira performance, especially under a musasa tree, you might wake up with someone else's memory, sometimes helpful, sometimes confusing, always worth writing down in your mental diary. If you're dozing right now, good news, you may be halfway to enlightenment, or at least an interesting dream about a dancing baboon. But not everyone treats the mbira as sacred. Scholars still debate whether its spiritual status was widespread among all Shona clans, or primarily linked to specific religious lineages, like the Svikiro spirit mediums. Some even argue that colonial classification of African instruments inflated certain symbols for anthropological convenience, like slapping ancient mysticism stickers on anything that didn't plug into a wall. Still, watching the mbira player tonight, you know one thing for sure: this isn't performative. This is communion. The storyteller plucks out a final flourish, and the fire lets out a puff like it's clapping politely. Someone in the back lets out a sigh. Not boredom, just a kind of spiritual exhale. That girl in the story, she's long gone. Of course, but her whispers still feel close, like the echo of thunder when the sky isn't quite sure what mood it's in. Around you, the circle shifts subtly. A father wraps his shawl tighter. A grandmother adjusts her hat. Someone offers you a roasted peanut with more reverence than a diamond. You take it. It's warm, like it's been sitting on the story itself. As the mbira is carefully wrapped up again, You notice that the cloth it goes into is embroidered not extravagantly, just a few delicate sunbursts and zigzags. You realize those marks are stories too, just quieter ones. There's a joke among Mbira players if you forget a song. Ask your cloth, it's been listening. And now, the fire gives another sigh. Sparks lift into the air and vanish like notes that changed their minds. The air is thicker now, not heavy, just full of sound, breath, memory, and the kind of silence that knows how to wait its turn. You lie back, just a bit, and listen to your own breathing, that same pattern you heard in the Mbira. In, out, a rhythm as old as the first tale told under the first tree. You're part of that now, and if you happen to dream tonight of stars whispering, or goats talking, or thunder behaving like a jealous uncle, well, that's just the Mbira doing what it's always done, lulling the world into its softer self. The fire dims, but the energy doesn't. It just shifts. The storyteller reaches behind them and lifts something wrapped in dark bark cloth. With care, they untie the bundle, revealing a basket round, shallow, carved from pale wood, its edges decorated with tiny burn marks in swirling patterns. The air feels different now, not solemn exactly, but attentive. Like even the smoke wants to sit up straighter. This isn't just a basket, it's the story basket, and everyone knows it. It's old, probably older than anyone here, maybe older than the termite-chewed stool it rests on. There are whispers that it once belonged to a great storyteller who only spoke in riddles and only ate white ants. You're not sure if that part's true, but honestly, it fits. The storyteller sets the basket beside them with a deliberate motion. No words, no dramatic unveiling, just placement. Here is where the stories live. Some say each tale inside the basket has a scent. Others say they hum when it rains. You're not sure if you believe that, but you definitely believe something lives in there. It's not empty. Here's a mainstream historical fact in Shona storytelling traditions. Objects like baskets or gourds often serve as symbolic vessels. Not only do they carry literal things, snuff, snacks, carved talismans, but they represent memory containers, holding a family or village's unwritten history. A story basket might not hold paper, but it holds everything that matters. And now, tonight's story is selected not by pointing or choosing, but by a quiet moment. The storyteller closes their eyes, brushes their fingers along the basket's rim, and then begins. No one asks what's inside. The tale is enough. Tonight, it's about a clever grandmother named Ambuya Jinoruma. Granny who bites. She wasn't a vampire. She just didn't tolerate fools. She lived at the edge of the village near a deep ravine where the wind always smelled like lemons. Even though no lemons ever grew there, her neighbors feared her cooking pot, which never needed fire to boil. It just steamed, constantly. Ambuya Jinoruma was a keeper of stories, too, but she told them backwards. She'd start with, "And so the man vanished," and only after everyone begged would she explain who the man was and why he had it coming. Children adored her, adults avoided her. Quirky detail for the night in some Shona tales. Storytellers insert false starts and deliberately wrong versions of stories as a way to test the audience's attention or memory. It's not deception, it's engagement. Think of it as live fact-checking, but cozier and with more cassava. Back to Ambuya Jinoruma one day. The villagers claimed she'd cursed the maize fields. Why? because her stories started lasting too long. An entire planting season passed mid-tale. The village elders confronted her, and she responded by telling a story about villagers confronting a woman about stories. Inside that story, more villagers. It was storyception. No one knew how many layers deep they were. Eventually, they gave up and went home. The maze came back anyway. But tonight, the storyteller shifts gears. The fire cracks again, this time louder, like it approves. The basket remains open, empty. Maybe, maybe not. One child stares into it like it might blink. Scholars still argue whether such baskets were standardized objects across Shona communities, or whether their meanings varied so wildly that no two were alike. Some researchers claim the carvings represent lunar phases. Others say they're just decorative flourishes. And one very serious academic once proposed that the spiral designs on one basket he studied matched the migratory paths of a now extinct antelope. That theory hasn't caught on. Still, there's no denying the power in the basket tonight. Everyone treats it like it breathes. A teen near you leans into their younger brother's ear and whispers, "The basket's humming." The boy's eyes widen. He believes it. You might too. The storyteller finishes Ambuya Jinoruma's tale with a flick of the wrist, as if shaking off the dust of memory. The basket is gently closed with the cloth again, not to hide the stories, but to let them rest. Stories, like people, need sleep. You lean your head to the side. The mat beneath you is softer than before. Or maybe you've just melted a little into it. The fire spits one last spark that arcs upward and vanishes mid-air, like a thought you forgot on purpose. The air smells like warm wood, burnt honey, and something old you can't name. The sky above is still no wind, no stars moving fast enough to notice, but you know it's all spinning slowly anyway, like the basket's design. If you listen closely, you can still hear it. Not the tale, not the flames, the silence after, that sacred hush where everyone holds their breath. Just long enough to wonder, what if that story was true? What if Ambuya Jinoruma is still telling it, somewhere, to someone who hasn't even been born yet? You close your eyes for just a second, and the basket stays closed until next time. The basket may be tucked away now, but the stories are far from finished. They're just moving, changing shape, growing legs. The storyteller clears their throat again, not from dust this time, but ceremony. The circle leans in, no prompting needed. They know what's coming, or at least, they think they do. You blink slowly as the words begin, this time about a tree, but not just any tree, the Musasa tree. You've seen it earlier in the day, standing like a sleepy sentinel at the edge of the village, its smooth grey trunk flecked with patches of lichen, branches like lazy arms cradling the heat. During the dry season, its leaves blush into coppery reds and rust-colored whispers, fluttering like gossip. This tree is no bystander. It is stage, shelter, witness. It's the community's open-air court, confession booth, and local news outlet rolled into one. When someone says, "Let's meet under the Musasa," what they mean is bring the truth. The storyteller smiles at the children and launches into a tale from beneath this very tree. A tale about two brothers who argued over a hen. Not a gold hen, not a magic hen, just an ordinary, annoyingly loud hen that laid no eggs but strutted like a royal goose. One brother claimed the hen insulted him. The other said the hen merely sneezed. The village gathered beneath the musasa tree to hear the debate. Elders sat in rows, arms folded. Children giggled until the hen squawked at them, which quieted things down impressively. And then, as always, the storyteller arrived not to judge, but to translate. Not the hen, mind you, the humans. Your historical fact for the hour: in many Shona villages, musasa trees serve as traditional community centers. Meetings, ceremonies, trials, and storytelling all unfold beneath their boughs. The tree itself symbolizes endurance and flexibility, a slow, living witness to generations of laughter, tears, and low-stakes poultry litigation. As the storyteller continues, a familiar rhythm returns, not in the voice, but in the pauses. Under the musasa, no one rushes. It's considered rude to answer quickly. You must think, reflect, or at least look like you're doing so. A breeze slips through the gathering now, gentle enough to nudge a lock of hair behind your ear. The leaves above tremble slightly. You swear the musasa is listening too. Now for something a bit odd. Some say if you lie beneath a musasa during a thunderstorm and your feet point west, you'll dream of your great-grandparents' last meal. Whether that's mystical or just indigestion remains, shall we say. Hotly debated. And speaking of debates, historians still argue whether musasa trees were chosen for their symbolic meaning, or if they just happened to grow well in communal areas, and someone decided, well, this is convenient. Function or faith, shelter or sacred. Maybe both, or maybe, as one elder once said, the musasa tree didn't become important. We just listened long enough to notice it already was. Back in the story, the two brothers go back and forth. The hen, naturally, offers no statement. Eventually, a child too young to know better asks the only real question. What if the hen's not the problem, and that breaks the spell? Laughter bubbles up around the fire. Not loud, just warm. Laughter like a leaf finally letting go after the winds insisted all day. The story ends with the brothers apologizing not to each other, but to the hen. The hen, true to form, ignores them both and pecks at a peanut shell with smug finality. You realize then some stories don't teach lessons. Some just hold up a mirror and let you blink at it until you start giggling. The musasa in the story fades, but the one above you tonight holds firm. Its branches barely move, as if honoring the stillness. And around you, the fire dims another notch. A baby is dozing on someone's chest. A teenager draws idle shapes in the dust. A grandmother leans her chin into her hand, not tired, just floating. You remember now this same tree was where the storyteller first learned the tales. Back when they had a gap-toothed smile and thought chickens could talk if you were polite enough. They sat cross-legged in the dirt, mimicking the elders' nods, trying to absorb rhythm by osmosis. They still do, really, only now. The nodding is theirs. You look up into the musasa branches. The stars are tangled in the leaves like sequins caught in a net. You think, maybe the tree holds those too. It's a good night for quiet things, for stories without morals, for trees that don't ask to be special, but become sacred just by sticking around long enough. And as the next log is nudged into the fire, sparks jump up like little truths trying to fly. They don't get far, but honestly, they don't need to. The fire crackles a little louder now, as if sensing that the next story will require some extra punctuation. The storyteller smiles, not kindly this time, but mischievously, a corner of the mouth smirk that says this one's going to trip somebody. A few kids lean forward, while the elders brace themselves. It's time for a favorite genre around here, trickster tales. And nobody tricks quite like Tsuro. The hair, small, clever, irritatingly fast, and absolutely allergic to honesty. Tsuro is the kind of character who would borrow your bucket and come back with a goat, insisting you asked for it. Tonight's story. It's one of the old ones. A tale involving Tsuro, baboon who always falls for something, and a fresh pot of wild honey that somehow smells like bananas and bad decisions. Tsuro, wandering through the forest, stumbles on a tree dripping with honey. It's too high to reach, but he knows baboon will help, if he lies properly. So Tsuro tells baboon that the tree is magic, and that only those pure of heart can taste its sweetness. Baboon, preening like a peacock on payday, agrees to help. As baboon climbs, Tsuro blesses the tree with nonsense words and waves a stick like it's a wand. The villagers gathered around your fire start giggling. They know what's coming. While baboon is distracted, Tsuro pulls out a small gourd from his bag and starts scooping up fallen honey. By the time baboon gets back down, stung and sticky, Tsuro has already burped loudly and declared that the tree has chosen. Mainstream historical fact in many Shona traditions. Tsuro is not just a comic character, he's a moral mirror. His victories, though questionable, often reveal flaws in others' greed, vanity, or blind obedience. Trickster tales like these are centuries old, likely older than any written record in the region. And if you're wondering, yes, similar trickster figures appear all over Africa. Anansi the spider in West Africa, jackal in Khoisan Lora, coyote among Native Americans. Apparently, every culture needs someone small and annoying to make the big folks think twice. Tonight's Tsuro tale continues. Baboon, furious, tries to get revenge the next day by offering Tsuro some special fruit he's found near the river. Tsuro, no fool, trades it for a rock painted to look like a mango. Baboon eats it anyway. You know what happens next. A pause, a crunch, and a scream. The storyteller pantomimes it dramatically. One hand on the cheek, eyes wide. Laughter erupts again, this time from the children who've clearly heard this version at least 5 times but never tire of the punchline. And now, your quirky tidbit. Some storytellers in rural Zimbabwe use pebbles or leaves as character tokens during these tales, picking up one to represent Tsuro, another for baboon. It's theater, sure, but also tradition. These objects become mnemonic devices, helping the flow, guiding the tempo. A rock, a feather, even a stick with a knot becomes a tiny actor in the palm of someone who knows how to spin a world. As the laughter dies down, someone near you whispers, Tsuro is everyone's cousin until he borrows your sandals, which is to say we all love cleverness until it's aimed at us. Still, you sense a quiet admiration in the group, even among the elders. There's a relief in laughing at the scammer, especially when the scammer loses, or at least gets away looking ridiculous. But there's an undercurrent, too. Trickster tales always come with a sting. Tsuro may win today, but someday, someone smarter will be waiting. That tension, that eventuality, keeps the story alive. Historians still argue whether Tsuro was meant to be heroic or cautionary, clever or cruel. The truth is probably tangled. Like most honey-covered rabbits, the fire pops again, another log settles. A yawn escapes a teen trying not to show it. The storyteller nods knowingly. That's the problem with sweet things. They say they always come with bees. You think about that for a moment. About things you've wanted that came with consequences. About clever words and hungry mouths. About stories that sound different when you hear them as an adult. The Musasa tree above is still. Its leaves like little listeners. The air carries a hint of wood smoke, now mixed with roasted nuts and maybe a bit of earth after a long, dry day. Someone passes a small cup of mahi, a fermented grain drink. It tastes sour and soft and cool in your mouth. And Tsuro, you suspect, is still running somewhere covered in honey, smiling too wide, already thinking up the next lie. Just like the story, it always finds another path, always escapes, always comes back. You nestle deeper into your spot, head heavier now, shoulders lower. You smile, even with your eyes mostly closed after all. You didn't get tricked, but you definitely got pulled in. The night has grown thicker. The edges of the fire's light don't reach quite as far now, swallowed by the rising hush of the bush beyond the village. Then soft, so soft you hear it. Rain, not a downpour, just a quiet drizzle, like the sky forgot to be angry and decided to sigh instead. It lands on the thatch roofs with a gentle hiss, like rice grains hitting a hot pan. The fire doesn't complain, it just ducks a little lower, letting the steam rise off its shoulders like breath in cold air. The storyteller doesn't pause, no need. Rain is not an interruption here, it's punctuation. And so, with perfect timing, they begin a rain story, one of the quiet ones, a tale about a boy who lived in a village that had forgotten water, not because the rivers dried up, not because the gods were angry, but because the elders stopped singing. The boy didn't understand at first. Every time he asked why the crops failed, why the wells grew mossy, why the sky ached with silence, the adults just shook their heads and said, "It's not time yet." So the boy dreamed instead, and in his dreams, clouds spoke, not in words, but in rhythms. They throbbed with melodies, not thunder. One night, a particularly swollen cloud whispered a tune into his left ear. He woke up humming it, and everything changed. Here's your historical anchor in many Shona communities. Rain-making rituals were a vital spiritual practice. The makombwe, or rain spirits, were invoked through music, clapping, dance, and often mbira songs specifically designed to attract clouds. The idea wasn't to demand rain, but to invite it like hosting an ancestor with song and sincerity. Back in the story, the boy wanders from village to village, humming his tune. Most adults dismiss him. One slaps his head gently and says, "Dreams are for cows and poets." But eventually, a blind grandmother joins him in humming, then 2 children, then a few teens, and somewhere in that song, a faint rumble. Now here's your quirky detail in some Shona rituals. Participants would scatter small bits of snuff or millet flour into the wind, not as an offering to spirits, but to show the sky that we still know how to give. It's humble, wordless theology, trade something tiny for something vast. The storyteller's voice slows as the rain outside deepens. You hear the difference, not just droplets on thatch, but water beginning to gather in corners, in leaves, in memory. A baby nearby murmurs in sleep. The fire curls tighter, as if folding in on itself. The boy in the tale eventually finds the oldest baobab tree in the region. It's so wide it holds a hollowed-out drum inside. The drum has no skin, no stick, no rhythm left, but the boy presses his ear to it, and the cloud song is still there, just waiting. He hums the tune into the trunk. The tree shivers, the sky listens, and then nothing. For a day, maybe two, but eventually, in the stillest part of the afternoon, when even the flies have given up hope, a single drop hits the middle of a dry gourd. Ping, then another, then the kind of rain that isn't rain at all, but a chorus, a homecoming. Historians still argue whether tales like this were based on real rain events or constructed retroactively to explain agricultural cycles. Some say these stories are pure metaphor, meant to teach patience. Others believe that ancient communities passed down actual weather patterns coded in characters and rhythm. Maybe both are true, or maybe it rains harder when someone believes. As the storyteller finishes, the drizzle outside eases into mist. You smell it now, wet earth, damp ash, something leafy and faintly sweet. It's not strong, just familiar, like the scent of an old shirt worn on a better day. Someone nearby whispers, "Rain with manners," and the circle chuckles. You watch a child cup their hands to catch droplets leaking through a gap in the thatch. She sips it like tea, grinning. It's probably the freshest water she'll taste all week. And you feel cleaner somehow. Not physically, but somewhere deeper, like a bit of your dust has finally settled. The fire stirs one last time, and the storyteller lets the silence speak for a while. Not because they've run out of words, but because some moments don't need them. The boy in the story. He disappears, not tragically just. Steps into the mist one day, humming. Nobody's seen him since, but every so often, when the season is wrong and the sky forgets to cry, someone will start humming without knowing why. And then rain. The storyteller leans back now, their hands warmed by the fire, which crackles with renewed life as someone nudges a fresh log into place. The drizzle has retreated, leaving only the smell of damp earth and that soft, heavy silence that follows a light rain, like the whole village has taken one long, deep breath. And into that silence, the storyteller drops a single phrase, like a pebble into a still pond. Do you remember the rainmaker's head's nod? Eyes squint with memory, and you settle back again, your limbs looser now, your attention hovering somewhere between now and not quite now. Tonight's tale is not about a single person, but a tradition, a way of being, a disappearing kind of magic. The rainmakers were not so much sorcerers as specialists, people whose job it was to ask the sky to remember kindness. They were often elders, sometimes women, sometimes men, never flashy. Their tools: a feather, a pot of ash, a song passed down from someone who once forgot it and then remembered again in a dream. In this story, a village tired, cracked, coughing dust is desperate. The maze is limp. The river is a rumor. The frogs are sulking. And so, the rainmakers are summoned. But here's the twist. 2 rainmakers arrive. One is a woman with a walking stick carved like a spiral. She walks slowly, as if measuring the land with her toes. The other is a man with a mouth full of proverbs, and a drum no one recognizes. The villagers bless them cannot decide who to follow, so they argue. Your mainstream historical fact, Shona rainmaking ceremonies, called mutoro, were once a widespread spiritual practice, especially among the Karanga and Sezuru peoples. These rituals involved ancestral invocations, offerings, and music, particularly the mbira. Some ceremonies lasted days. They weren't merely performance, they were negotiations between the living and the not-so-gone. But in this tale, the villagers split down the middle. Half follow the woman to the old musasa tree, where she hums to the wind and listens more than she speaks. The other half dance with the man, whose drum rhythms summon dust devils and wide-eyed chickens. Each claims results. Each side glares at the other. One elder swears the woman's ritual made her yam leaves perk up. Another insists the man's chant made his goat lactate twice in one morning. As evidence goes, this is apparently enough. Now for your quirky tidbit. In some versions of rain-making ceremonies, it was customary to place bowls of water at the edge of a homestead, not for the spirits, but to reflect the intention of rain, like offering the sky a mirror and saying, "Look, this is what we remember. This is what we're asking for." Back in the story, tension grows. One side claims the other has offended the ancestors. Someone accuses someone else of hiding snuff from the offering pile. A child kicks over a bowl of ashes and blames the wind. The goat is very confused, and the sky still dry. Historians still argue whether rainmakers truly influenced the weather, or if the ceremony served more as social salves, a way for a community to unify in hope, to cleanse blame, to say we did something. Some argue that the songs were tuned to mimic thunder, that their rhythm was a kind of sympathetic vibration. Others believe the ritual simply allowed people to grieve their thirst together, and sometimes that was enough. Eventually, in the story, the two rainmakers meet not to fight, but to listen. The woman offers the man a gourd of fermented sorghum. He takes it with both hands. They sit, silently, under the tree, letting the wind speak first. Together, they begin a third song, not hers, not his, something new. The village, seeing this, gathers close again. Someone starts clapping. A boy plays mbira with only 2 working notes, and somehow it's exactly what's needed. That night, clouds gather not dramatically, not all at once, just a little thickening in the sky's voice. And by dawn, the ground is soft enough to hold footprints again. The storyteller finishes the tale with a gentle shrug, saying only, sometimes, it takes 2, and for a moment, nobody moves. A log settles in the fire, a baby whimpers and is quickly rocked back into peace. A breeze rolls across the fire circle, brushing the edge of your mat. You close your eyes briefly and imagine the 2 rainmakers still out there, walking opposite sides of a hill, listening for the first drop, not because they control the sky, but because they remember how to ask. And maybe that's the part the village forgot. The fire has burned down to a thick, glowing bed of coals now, perfect for this next tale, the kind that sends a chill down your spine, even though you're warm, the kind that makes you shift slightly so your toes don't stick out past the mat. Because tonight, you're getting a story that involves snakes, spirits, and just enough scandal to make the elders fake cough and pretend they've never heard it before. The storyteller leans in, voice low, almost conspiratorial. There once lived a man with 2 wives and one big problem, only one of them was human. Cue a ripple of laughter, then silence. The man, known only as Mambo Temba, was respected, had goats, owned a shiny hoe that never rusted, knew proverbs no one understood, classic elder material. But he was greedy, not for riches, for secrets. He wanted to know what the ancestors never told him, and he wanted to live forever. So, one market day, while trading maize for snuff, he met a stranger, a woman with sharp eyes, a slow voice, and a basket full of nothing, literally nothing, yet everyone avoided her stall like it was on fire. Naturally, Mambo Temba was intrigued. The two talked. She told him things no one should know, like where he hid his grandfather's snuff pipe as a child, and the true reason his rooster crowed 4 times on his wedding day. A week later, he brought her home, introduced her as his second wife. The village murmured. His first wife, Mai Kundai, didn't. She just smiled tightly and started sleeping with her axe nearby. Mainstream historical fact here in traditional Shona society. Polygamy was common in many communities, but it wasn't just about status. It often served economic and familial functions, but it could also cause conflict, especially when inheritance, ritual roles, or social rank were in play. First wives typically held seniority, but second or third wives sometimes wielded unexpected power, especially if they were believed to bring luck or danger. Back in the tale, odd things began to happen. Chickens vanished, clay pots cracked by themselves. The village dog refused to enter Mambo Temba's yard, and the new wife never blinked, never aged, always bathed at midnight, singing to a pot that no one could see. Mai Kundai tried to warn her husband, but he brushed her off. "She's just different," he said. "You're jealous." Then, one night, the boy herding cattle returned with news he'd seen the second wife in the fields at dawn, swallowing a snake whole, head first, no chewing, just a gulp, and gone. Cue screaming, running, one elder fainting politely. And here's your quirky tidbit. Shona folklore contains a rich collection of shape-shifting stories, particularly involving pythons, spirits, and mysterious women who may or may not be human. Some tales describe a spirit wife who appears during droughts or plagues and vanishes once balance is restored or chaos finishes its meal. In the tale, the villagers call for the Nanga, the traditional healer. He arrives with bones, dust, and a voice like dry leaves. After a long trance, he announces, "She is not a wife, she is a messenger. She was sent to remind Mambo Temba that the dead are tired of being ignored." You see, the man had not poured libation. He had not thanked the ancestors. He tried to live forever, but he forgot to say please. The second wife disappears that very night, slithers into the river and turns to mist, or so they say. Mambo Temba survives, barely, but from that day on, he forgets everything, every name, every proverb, even how to eat sadza without poking himself in the eye. Historians still argue whether these tales of spirit wives were cautionary metaphors about social change, perhaps reminders to maintain ritual obligations during times of transition, like droughts, marriages, or aging. Others think they're just campfire drama that spiraled into spiritual doctrine. Either way, the line between real and not real was never the point. The point was, respect the old ways, or at least don't mock them over breakfast. Back around the fire, the story ends. A silence follows heavier than usual. Someone coughs, someone else mutters. That's why I don't trust quiet women. A few chuckles, a nervous glance or two. Then the storyteller grins. Relax, they say. She's not here. A twig snaps in the dark. Everyone freezes. You pull your blanket a little tighter, just in case. The fire pops again. Just coals now. A soft glow. Shadows dancing lazily, like they've lost interest in being scary. But still you keep your toes on the mat, just in case one of the messengers decides to drop by uninvited. And you think, maybe next time. Pour a little water on the ground before you eat. Not for the crops, not even for the ancestors, just in case someone or something is still listening. The fire burns low and steady, like it knows not to upstage the next storm. The rain has slipped away, the coals are purring, and you're somewhere between fully present and pleasantly blurred. That's the perfect place to be for what comes next. A story that doesn't bother with logic or grown-up rules, because this is the tale of the children who stole the moon. Yes, the moon, round, smug, glowing like it owns the night sky. The storyteller doesn't introduce it with any fanfare. They just look up at the stars so still, so indifferent, and say, long ago, very long ago, there were children who didn't like bedtime, so they took the moon. The kids in the audience perk up. Of course they do. It's their favorite kind of mischief collective, bold, and definitely without adult supervision. In the tale, the village elders had a rule: when the moon is high, children sleep. No noise, no stories, no snacks. The moon, they said, was the eye of the night, watching, judging, tattle-telling to the ancestors. So the children, clever, fed up, full of bean stew and ambition, decided to fix things. One by one, they snuck out of their mats and tiptoed past dozing goats. They climbed the tallest baobab, tied together reeds, feathers, even a ladle, and they made a hook, a moon hook. The storyteller describes the process so casually, you almost believe it's possible. You picture these kids, balancing on branches, whispering instructions, arguing over whether the moon is made of egg yolk or bone. Consensus? Neither. It's like grandma's knees, and then they snag it. The hook catches. The moon wobbles, then slowly, reluctantly, it drops into their waiting basket. They run, giggling into the night, moon tucked under a goatskin. One says they'll cook it, another wants to ride it. A third says they'll sell it to the next village for 2 hens and a bag of sugarcane. And just like that, night breaks. The stars scatter, the trees freeze, the crickets lose their rhythm, even the hyenas pause mid-laugh, confused. Now for your mainstream historical fact, in Shona cosmology, celestial bodies were more than just sky decor. They were active participants in human affairs. The moon was tied to planting cycles, fertility, timing rituals, and measuring sacred days. A moonless night meant more than darkness. It meant disorder, the kind that threw the whole world slightly offbeat. Back in the story, the village wakes up in chaos. Water tastes wrong, fire won't light, dreams won't settle. One woman claims her shadow ran away. Another swears her chicken spoke Shona and demanded a raise. The children, realizing they've accidentally broken the universe, panic. They try to return the moon, but it won't float back up. One kid tries to blow it into the sky like a balloon. Another prays. A third just cries into it, whispering, "We were only trying to stay up late." Now for your quirky detail in some Shona folk tales. Celestial theft is a recurring motif, not just with the moon, but stars, thunder, or even whole seasons. These stories often serve as cautionary fables about balance taking too much, or tampering with forces that have their own agendas. They're playful, yes, but never without a hint of warning. Eventually, the children take the moon to the village Nanga, who sighs like someone who's cleaned up this mess before. They perform a slow, clumsy ritual rubbing the moon with fermented milk, singing an off-key song, and tossing a guinea fowl feather into the air. Finally, the moon begins to rise, hiccuping slightly as it floats. But here's the twist when it reaches the sky. It's no longer round. Now, it has a chunk missing the first crescent moon. And from that day on, the moon never stays full for long. It waxes, wanes, shrinks, and grows always slightly moody, like it's still recovering from its surprise vacation in a child's basket. Historians still argue whether lunar myths like these arose to explain natural lunar phases, or if the phases inspired the stories later. Some propose that such tales were mnemonic tools for agrarian calendars, allowing even the youngest children to understand planting times by watching the moon's mood swings. Others argue maybe it was just a good story. The storyteller wraps up the tale with a wink. And that's why, children, the moon hides part of itself, so no one can steal the whole thing again. You hear a few quiet giggles from nearby mats. Someone's baby makes a hiccuping sound in their sleep. A pot shifts slightly, echoing the plink of moonlight overhead. You glance up, just in case. The moon is visible only half of it. The rest may be still sulking. You imagine tiny fingerprints on its edges. Laughter echoing up the trunk of a baobab. A sky that never quite forgot being tricked by children who just wanted 5 more minutes. And in the firelight, you smile, because somewhere out there, the moon remembers. The fire barely speaks now, just a warm glow nestled in its clay belly, pulsing gently, like it's fallen into its own nap. Around you, the night is a blanket, heavy and still, but the storyteller sits straighter, voice soft but steady, like a hand smoothing creases out of cloth. The next tale is slower, sadder. It touches something deeper. Do you know? They begin, that every name is a prayer. Everyone listens closely. This is a story about ashes and names and the way people live on when their names are spoken and disappear when they're not. The tale begins with a girl called Rumbidzai, which means give thanks. She was born during a famine. Her father said the name would remind them to be grateful, even for dry sorghum and stubborn goats. Her mother wasn't so sure, but the name stuck like dew on morning grass. Rumbidzai grew into a young woman who liked quiet things, grinding stones, weaving mats, the sound of millet falling into a wooden bowl. When she laughed, it was always with her hand half covering her mouth, like she didn't want to disturb the birds. But when she died too young, too suddenly, something strange happened. No one spoke her name again. It wasn't from fear or guilt, just forgetting, or maybe avoiding. Her family never said, "Remember Rumbidzai?" They said, "Back then," or "When the air was different," or "Before the silence." And so, Rumbidzai faded. Here's your historical fact. In many Shona traditions, names carry weight. They're not just labels, they're declarations, memories, warnings. Naming a child isn't done lightly. A name may reflect the mood of a birth, a political climate, or even a curse that must be confronted. Some names are prayers for the future. Others are anchors to the past. In this tale, a wandering griot, a traveling storyteller, visits the village years later. He stops at Rumbidzai's family homestead, and while drinking from their clay cup, he speaks a name he heard in a dream. Rumbidzai. The family freezes. How do you know that name? He shrugs. She told me. And with that, it all comes back. The stories, the laughter, the mat she wove that no one could copy, her favorite goat, which hated rain, even the lullaby she hummed while sifting grain. It had been there all along, just hiding beneath the ashes. Your quirky tidbit: some Shona families keep ashes from cooking fires that burned during a relative's life. These ashes aren't always stored, they may just remain in the same hearth, quietly honored. If someone stirs those ashes with the wrong kind of stick, or sweeps them carelessly, an elder might mutter, "Be gentle, that's someone's memory." In the story, the family returns to Rumbidzai's old mat. They find it curled and dry, brittle at the edges. But they place it near the fire, not to sit on, just to be near her again. The storyteller pauses now. Around the fire, the energy has changed. No giggles, no whispers, just the sound of someone slowly sipping from a tin cup, the occasional crack of cooling coals, and a sigh that might have come from the tree above you. Historians still argue whether naming customs in Shona culture evolved mainly for spiritual reasons or for community record keeping. Some argue names were mnemonic devices in oral societies, ways to encode events in the identities of the living. Others believe naming is a kind of defiance, a way to say, "We see you, we remember, you were here." The storyteller finishes the tale with a whisper. And so, the name returned. And so, the girl did too. You sit in the stillness after, and it settles over your skin like smoke. You think about the names you haven't said in a while. Grandparents. Friends. Maybe someone who slipped out of memory, like a story you meant to finish but never did. You wonder what your name might mean if it were in a tale. Would it be a warning, a song, a joke someone tells every year when the maize is ready? Maybe you think, your name isn't finished yet. Maybe it still has new meanings to collect. The fire gives one small pop like applause or agreement, and beside you, someone murmurs their grandmother's name, just once, like a key turning in a very old lock. A breeze slips through the circle, now soft, playful, scented faintly with wood smoke, and something sharp, like dried lemongrass, crushed underfoot. The storyteller grins, that crooked this one's for fun grin, and you feel the shift before the first word is even spoken. Let me tell you, they say, about the village that banned roosters. You blink. Yes, roosters. Every single one. Not because of a plague, or a curse, or dietary concerns. No, this village simply decided it couldn't stand the noise. The story goes like this. There was once a small village tucked between two ridges, where the sun arrived too early and stayed too long. Every morning, the roosters started crowing before dawn, anxious, overachieving birds determined to outdo one another. And these weren't your average cock-a-doodle-doo types. These roosters crowed in scales, with vibrato, and occasionally questionable timing. One even crowed in reverse. Villagers began waking up tired, cranky, and convinced the birds were conspiring against them. Eventually, after the local chief was woken one too many times by what sounded like a chicken yodeling at the stars, a council was held under the musasa tree. After much clapping, grumbling, and one very dramatic monologue from a rooster named Vonzai, yes, the birds were invited to defend themselves. The council reached a decision: all roosters would be politely escorted out of the village. And so they were, by ox cart, to a nearby hill. One elder waved tearfully. One child tried to smuggle hers back in under her shirt. She was caught by the unmistakable sound of muffled crowing and sentenced to weed the sweet potato fields for a week. Here's your historical fact. Just to ground the chaos, Shona communities often used animal behavior as omens or metaphors in oral storytelling. Roosters, in particular, were associated with timing, awakening, and masculine presence, their crow marking the boundary between night and day. To remove that marker, symbolic chaos. And yes, it's entirely possible this tale originated as a metaphor about ignoring tradition. Or maybe the villagers just really hated mornings. Things got strange after the ban. Without roosters, no one knew when to wake up. Some rose with the goats. Others waited until the sun hit their big toe. The grain miller kept showing up to grind maize at sunset. A wedding was missed entirely when the bride assumed it was still nighttime. Then came the whisper of a curse. Elders murmured that time itself had become confused. Chickens began laying eggs at odd hours. A cow gave birth at midnight, and the calf mooed in perfect rhythm a rooster's revenge. Some said, now for your quirky detail in a few rural Shona communities. It was once believed that animals, particularly birds, could carry messages from the spiritual world, especially if they behaved strangely. A rooster crowing at dusk, for example, might signal a death or an ancestor passing through. So yes, banning them could be seen as spiritually reckless, or at least deeply confusing to the spirit realm. Back in the story, the villagers tried alternatives. They trained goats to bleat at sunrise. Failed. They made a sundial out of termite mounds. It melted. One old man tried yelling now every morning, but he overslept too often and no one trusted his tone. Eventually, they brought one rooster back. Just one. He was old, lopsided, and missing half his tail. They named him Chokwadi Truth. He crowed at dawn, and only at dawn. No theatrics, no flair. The village sighed with relief. Historians still argue whether this tale was a critique of leadership, modernization, or communal stubbornness. Some say it mocks those who throw away tradition without understanding what it anchors. Others think it's a parable about ego. The roosters and the villagers both being guilty of shouting when listening would have worked better. The storyteller closes the tale with a grin. And to this day, no one trusts a chicken with a strong opinion. Around the fire, laughter returns bright, grateful, sleepy at the edges. You feel it too. That comfort of a silly story with a sticky center. You think of all the small, weird decisions people make out of frustration, and how they always find their way back eventually. Above you, the stars have shifted. The moon is hiding behind a cloud again, as if still offended by its earlier kidnapping, and you wonder, just briefly, how many quiet mornings were saved by one cranky bird. The coals hiss softly, a slow goodbye. Someone refolds their shawl. A dog stretches in its sleep, and you smile into the dark, knowing full well that if you hear a rooster crow in your dreams tonight, it's probably just Chukwadi checking the time. The night deepens, folds over you like a heavy cotton wrap, and the fire now feels less like a centerpiece and more like a companion. It's all rhythm now, the creak of bodies shifting, the whisper of wind stirring ash, the almost musical thud of someone dropping a dried cob of maize into a basket. The storyteller doesn't stand or gesture. They simply begin tapping softly, thumb against palm, slow and steady, mimicking a sound every villager knows in their bones, the grinding stone. It's not glamorous, but it's the heartbeat of the homestead. That soft, repetitive scrape of stone on stone, a woman's rhythm, a morning song, a reminder that no meal begins without effort. And tonight, the story that unfolds is built entirely around that quiet labor. It begins with a girl named Tanyaradzwa. Her name means "we have been comforted," which is ironic, because she was born during a time of disruption. Not a drought, not a war, something less visible but just as unsettling, the road. You see, the government had decided that the new tar road would cut straight through the village. Overnight, the place changed. Bicycles arrived, radios blared, and trucks noisy. Dusty things rolled past at dawn, interrupting the sacred hour when grinding stones used to sing the day awake. Tanyaradzwa's grandmother, Ambuya Chietza, refused to stop her morning grind. Every day at first light, she placed her bowl of dried maize beside her and began that patient ritual grip. Push, pull, crush. The motion was slow, circular, eternal, like she was turning time backward. But one day, the grinding stopped, not because she was tired, but because the government had brought electric mills. Faster, louder, efficient. Suddenly, grinding became a noise, not a song. Tanyaradzwa hated the new sound. It didn't hum, it roared. It didn't carry memory, it shredded it. Here's your mainstream historical fact. In many Shona households, grinding grain with stones was a multi-generational ritual, grandmothers teaching daughters and granddaughters the rhythm of food preparation, story exchange, and prayer. The motion wasn't just functional, it was cultural transmission in motion. Colonial and post-colonial infrastructure disrupted these practices, not by banning them, but by outpacing them. In the Teil, Tanyaradzwa begins sneaking out early, before the village stirs. She finds her grandmother's old grinding stone, half buried, mossy, but intact, and begins practicing. Her hands blister, the maize spills, she almost quits. But one morning, she hears something, a voice, not a ghost, not a dream, a story, coming from the stone. It's her grandmother's voice, telling the tale of how she once outran a hippo on a dare, and how she met her husband while hiding from a leopard in a millet patch. The stories don't come from the air, they come from the rhythm. Now your quirky tidbit. Some Shona storytellers believe that certain tools can store memory, not metaphorically actually. Grinding stones, cooking pots, even wooden spoons are thought to absorb the voice, mood, or presence of the person who used them most. There are tales of pots that cry when the wrong person stirs them, or stones that whisper old lullabies. When warmed by the sun, back in the story, Tanyaradzwa keeps grinding. She begins to collect the stories, not by writing them down, but by listening. Each motion releases another one. By the end of a month, she knows how her grandmother broke a curse with sour milk. She knows the names of the goats who could count. She knows what the stars meant when they tilted sideways one August night in 1942. But then progress intrudes again. The village headman announces that the old grinding stones will be removed to make space for a new storage hut. Tanyaradzwa begs them to spare hers. They refuse. So, she does the only thing a teenager with stubborn ancestors and a spine of hardwood would do. She steals it. She and her cousin roll the stone into the bush, hide it under a musasa tree. Every morning, they return to grind and listen. Even when they marry and move away, they come back, even when the road is paved again. Wider this time, they return. Eventually, they bury the stone beneath a fig tree. They say nothing, but the stories don't stop. Historians still debate whether oral traditions truly live in objects, or if that belief is symbolic, a poetic expression of grief for lost routines. Some ethnographers argue that the objects serve as anchors, emotional placeholders that keep memory close. Others believe the tools are simply tools. But you, sitting here, listening to the tale unwind like millet into a wooden bowl, you believe it, just a little. You glance around. One elder nods in time with the invisible rhythm. A child traces spirals in the dust. Someone cracks a peanut without looking down, and for a moment, the entire circle hums like a grinding stone, low, steady, remembering something that hasn't been said in years. The storyteller lets the story fade like a last scrape of stone on maize. No ending, no summary, just that soft sense of work completed, and you feel it in your arms, in your chest. That rhythm, grip, push, pull. Remember, the night has folded in so tightly now that it's hard to tell where the darkness ends and your own shadow begins. The fire is little more than a glowing memory in the middle of the circle. It throws just enough light to catch the edges of a smile, the glint of an earring, or the slow blink of someone half asleep, but unwilling to miss what comes next. The storyteller clears their throat, not out of necessity but for effect. It's a warning that the next tale has sharp teeth and doesn't always end neatly. They begin, there was once a pot, a witch pot, and a wardrobe that swallowed a chief's wife. Yes, things are about to get strange. The tale starts in a quiet homestead at the edge of the forest, where a woman named Mainingi lived alone. She wasn't old or bent or cackling, no hunched back, no cats, just silence, and a very clean house. Too clean. One day, she's seen at the market buying a third cooking pot, though she lives alone. When asked why, she says, "One for me, one for visitors, and one for the one who hasn't arrived yet." Nobody asks follow-up questions, because that kind of phrasing, that's spirit language. Soon after, food begins disappearing from nearby homesteads. Not all of it, just the choice cuts. One child swears he saw a spoon flying on its own. A grandmother opens her sugar tin and finds a beetle lounging in it, with a smug expression and no explanation. Then comes the wardrobe. It appears one morning in Mainingi's yard carved, ancient looking. Definitely not there the day before. She says it was a gift from her cousin in another province. No one recalls her having cousins. Here's your mainstream historical fact. While Shona spiritual belief systems include traditional healers Nangas, there is also a long-standing parallel belief in sorcerers Varoyi, who are said to use malevolent magic to cause illness, misfortune, or even death. The line between healer and witch isn't always clear, and accusations were often a way of negotiating social tensions or explaining the unexplainable. Soon, people start noticing strange things. Chickens forget how to lay eggs. Firewood doesn't burn. One man finds his shirt folded in a knot he couldn't undo without saying sorry 3 times. And then, most notoriously, the chief's wife goes to borrow salt and never returns. They search everywhere. Eventually, someone opens the wardrobe. Inside, they find a gourd. Not just any gourd, a talking gourd. It says, in a hoarse whisper, wrong shelf. It's promptly smashed. No sign of the chief's wife. Now for your quirky tidbit in Shona folklore. Everyday objects, clay pots, stools, even wardrobes are often vessels for spirits or portals to other realms. There's an old belief that if a pot breaks without falling, someone nearby is hiding something, and wardrobes rare in traditional homes, but when they appear in stories, they usually don't belong, which is code for bad magic alert. The village calls a council. They summon a powerful Nanga, who arrives carrying only a mirror, a snail shell, and a very unimpressed goat, too. He consults the fire, which sparks blue. He listens to the ground, which hums. Finally, he declares, the pot must be unboiled. You're not sure what that means. Neither is the audience in the story. But they obey, they gather, they chant, they pour cold water into the witch pot while singing backwards lullabies. Eventually, it burps, and the chief's wife rolls out of the wardrobe, dazed but fine. She's holding a spoon and muttering, "Tell the gourd, thank you." Historians still argue whether stories like these emerged from literal fears, spiritual explanations for disease, theft, or disappearance, or if they were allegories for social anxiety newcomers, unexplained misfortunes. Powerful women. Some scholars suggest they served as subtle moral policing. Others believe they're simply what happens when imagination meets nighttime. Back around the fire, the storyteller leans closer to the circle and whispers. They say the wardrobe is still out there, somewhere. Still swallowing gossip and secrets. A ripple moves through the group, laughter and unease braided together. You glance at the fire. The coals glow softly, but the shadows are shifting just a little too much for comfort. Someone mutters, "Mine's just a table." Right? Someone else mutters back, "Not if you left a secret on it." You wrap your blanket tighter, not because you're cold, but because this kind of story sticks to your ankles. And now you're thinking about your own wardrobe, and whether anything in there has heard too much. The storyteller exhales through their nose slow, amused, thoughtful. The fire, now an embered basin, pulses gently, throwing gold across the ring of tired bodies. And after that brush with witches and wardrobes, you expect something light, something simple. Instead, you get a tale about death, but not the kind that slams doors and screams. No, this one arrives smiling, offering a joke and a mat to sit on. The story begins with a funeral. A respected man, known as Sekuru Vamambo, has died. He was old, yes, but not tired. His last words were, "I'm not done yet," followed immediately by a snore so deep it made the chickens jump. His family prepares the body with care, wrapped in bark cloth, face painted with white ash, arms folded like he's listening to a secret. And then the unexpected happens. The mourners start laughing, not a little chuckle, roaring, doubled over, stomach-hurting laughter, because when they unwrap his final gift to the village, a mat he claimed would change everything they find, it's been woven into the shape of a goat, with ears and udders, and a tiny, woven tail. His widow just shakes her head and says, "He always thought he was funny." Mainstream historical fact among many Shona communities, funerals are as much about continuity as they are about closure. While mourning is central, laughter and storytelling are equally important, especially during the Doro Remazitate Guru ancestral beer ceremony, where tales of the deceased are shared freely, and grief is allowed to soften into joy. It's believed that the dead can hear, and they prefer not to be cried over too loudly. In this story, Sekuru's funeral becomes the most memorable in the region. People come from 5 villages over, not just to mourn, but to swap stories about the man who once convinced an entire council that a hyena had stolen his shoes. A cousin tells of the time Sekuru baked sweet potatoes in someone else's field, then blamed a ghost with a shovel. His son reveals his father once tried to make a rain charm using only old shoe soles and peanut butter. It almost worked, he insists, and throughout it all, the laughter continues. But here's the twist: the spirit of Sekuru, who's supposed to be resting, won't leave. Every morning after the funeral, someone finds a peanut shell tucked into a shoe, or hears a voice mumble, "Not done yet," from under the grain bin. The village Nanga is consulted. He listens, sniffs the air, and declares he's not upset. He's just still joking. The Nanga suggests a second funeral, not for the body, but for the spirit's sense of humor. So they hold a laughter ceremony. Everyone tells the worst jokes they can remember. Children imitate old men. Old women cackle until their teeth rattle. Even the goats look concerned. At the end, they place the goat-shaped mat on the fire and let the smoke carry Sekuru's laughter into the night. And finally, peace. Your quirky tidbit. In certain rural Zimbabwean communities, families have been known to hold second burials or rituals to correct funeral mishaps, calm restless spirits, or help the community move forward. Sometimes these involve symbolic gestures like burning clothes, breaking pots, or telling jokes to lighten the path. Historians still argue whether the inclusion of humor in funerals was an ancient ritualized practice, or if it evolved more recently to cope with loss in large, interconnected communities. Either way, the result is the same grief that breathes, mourning that doesn't clench. The storyteller finishes the tale with a shrug. Laughter is how we know the dead are listening. Cry too hard, and they turn their backs. Laugh a little, and they lean in. Around you, a few people wipe at their eyes, not from tears, but from laughter revisited. One elder sighs, then mutters, "My funeral better have jokes." Someone else replies, "Only if you earn them. You think of people you've lost. Maybe one or two had a goat-shaped soul. Maybe one still messes with your dreams, rearranging your memories like shoes left just slightly out of place. You look at the fire. It's dying down. Yes, but not out. You can still feel warmth coming off the ashes, like maybe someone hasn't quite left yet. Not until the last joke has landed. A hush settles now, not out of fear or reverence, Just the kind of hush that comes when everyone exhales at the same time without meaning to. The fire is so low it doesn't crackle anymore. It hums, like an old person nodding along to a memory. The storyteller brushes a hand across the dust beside them, drawing something invisible. Footprints, they say. That's how you find the ones who came before you. And with that, a story begins not of magic or mischief, but of millet dust and the footsteps that refuse to be forgotten. This one is about a boy named Chicomborero Blessing who loved to walk, not run, not sneak, not stomp, just walk, slowly. The kind of walking that looked like thinking, and every day, before school, after school, during chores especially instead of chores, he walked the same path through the fields. Over time, his steps carved a trail into the earth, soft, pale, fine as flour, coated in millet chaff and crushed leaves. His grandmother warned him that dust remembers. Don't walk foolishly. He thought she meant don't fall. She meant something else entirely. One day, Chicomborero goes missing, just vanishes. No one sees him leave. No note, no clues. Only the footprints remain clear, sharp, leading into the fields. But here's the strange thing, they don't end. The villagers follow them, over the ridge, past the dry river, into the tall grass where no one usually walks. Still they continue right foot, left foot, a boy's rhythm until the tracks reach an old termite mound shaped like a drum, and then they stop. No scuff, no pause, no turn, just disappear. Mainstream historical fact, the Shona people, like many Bantu-speaking communities, have a deep reverence for paths and trails, not just physical ones, but metaphorical. Paths are seen as connectors between generations, territories, and even spiritual realms. Elders often say, follow the path you know, not as advice, but as protection. In the tale, Chicomborero's family mourns, but the grandmother, old and silent, does not cry. She simply begins walking that trail every morning, retracing his steps, not to find him, but to remember him. With every pass, her feet stir the dust, but they never erase his prints. Years pass. A drought comes and goes. New children play. New crops are sown. But that millet path remains. No rain washes it away. No wind scatters it. It is as if the earth itself wants to keep the boy's memory in motion. Your quirky tidbit in certain areas of rural Zimbabwe. It's believed that paths worn through repetition hold spiritual resonance, especially if they lead to family graves, sacred trees, or vanished homes. Some say those paths hum at night. Others claim that stepping into someone else's daily trail while barefoot lets you borrow a piece of their story. Back in the tale, a girl from another village arrives decades later. She's come to marry, but as she passes the old trail, she pauses, looks down, then, slowly, she begins walking it. Her gait matches the prints exactly left, right, same length, same rhythm. She says, "It feels like my feet know where to go." The grandmother, now very old, nods once. He's walking again. Historians still argue whether such stories are meant to explain disappearances, children lost to migration, war, or famine, or if they are meditations on memory and movement. Some say the story of Chicomborero is a metaphor for unanswered prayers. Others say it's about how the land holds us, even after we are gone. The storyteller looks at the fire now, pokes it once, watches a single ember swirl up, turn gold, then vanish into the night. They add, you never really leave a place that remembers how your feet felt. Around you, no one speaks, but some eyes glance at the ground, at their own feet, at the dust they've kicked up, shifted, and maybe shaped without knowing. You close your eyes and imagine your own footprints where they've gone, where they linger. Maybe some still exist in dust you've long forgotten. Maybe someone's following them now, wondering who you were when you made them. And maybe, in some part of the world that doesn't forget so easily, a path shaped by your steps still hums quietly, warmly waiting to carry you back. The coals are just a breath now, tucked under a small mountain of ash, glowing faintly with the last heat of a well-spent evening. The air feels heavier, but in a good way, like a quilt someone's draped across your shoulders without asking, because they just knew. The storyteller stretches their back slowly, then reaches for something beside them, a thin clay pipe, carved with spiral marks. They don't light it, it's just part of the rhythm. Then they begin the next story, one that's part smoke, part smile, and completely unhurried. This one's about beauty, but not the polished, airbrushed kind. The kind that comes with age, tobacco-stained fingers, and gaps between teeth, wide enough to whistle through. They say there once lived a woman named Vongai Be Happy, and she had the most beautiful smile in 3 provinces. Not because it was perfect, not because it was white and straight, no, because it was hers, and because she only smiled when she meant it, which was rare. Vongai was known for 2 things, her roasted peanuts seasoned with salt, and secrets, and the thick twist of snuff tobacco she always kept tucked into her lip. Elders respected her, children feared her, dogs followed her at a respectful distance. When she spoke, people leaned in not just to hear her words, but to count the gaps in her teeth. There were 5. Some said 7. No one agreed because she never stayed still long enough for a proper look. Mainstream historical fact among many Shona communities. Tooth gaps, especially in the front, were considered a mark of beauty, maturity, and charisma. Some people even intentionally removed teeth to achieve the look, particularly during coming-of-age ceremonies or personal style expression. It wasn't considered strange. It was seen as a statement. Vongai's most famous moment came during a storytelling festival, when she was asked to speak last after every clever man and ambitious child had already performed. She said nothing for 5 long minutes, just chewing slowly on her snuff, letting the silence stretch until it was practically audible. Then, she told a story that no one understood, not right away. It was about a frog who refused to jump unless the wind told him a joke first. About a river that only flowed when you complimented it. About an old drum with no skin that still managed to sing. And when she finished, Vongai said, "If you didn't laugh, maybe the joke was about you." People clapped, mostly out of confusion, but they remembered it forever. Here's your quirky detail in rural Zimbabwean traditions. Tobacco, particularly snuff phodia, wasn't just for personal use. It was offered to spirits during ceremonies, sniffed by elders during negotiations, and shared during storytelling to soften the tongue. It was both stimulant and sacrament. And yes, it also kept the mosquitoes guessing. Back in the story, Vongai gets older. Her hair grays like storm clouds rolling over granite. Her spine curves, but her voice still sharp enough to shell peas. She starts forgetting faces, but never names. never stories. She says, the teeth are gone, but the tongue still knows the dance. Young people keep visiting her, not because she tells the best stories by now. Most of them unravel halfway through, detour into recipes, or end with her falling asleep mid-sentence, but because there's a kind of safety in her presence. They say she smells like memory smoke, salt, and old laughter. Historians still argue whether beauty standards like Von Guy's gap-toothed grin emerged from ancestral symbolism, practicality, or sheer personal flair. Some say it was rooted in oral tradition gaps, made it easier to project voice during performances. Others believe it simply marked a person who had lived long, smiled often, and didn't care who noticed. As Von Guy's legend grows, so does the myth. Some say she once convinced a crocodile to braid her hair, that she roasted peanuts so good, even spirits queued up to taste them. One tale says she blew snuff powder into a politician's ear and made him tell the truth for 5 whole minutes. When she dies quietly, with a smirk and one eye still open, the village doesn't cry much. They just pass around a small wooden bowl of her peanuts and tell her stories in the wrong order, as she would have liked. One child asks, "Can I smile with no teeth?" An elder says, "You'll learn." Another says, "Just don't fake it." The storyteller looks up now, and even in this sleepy dark, you can see a hint of that Von Guy grin reflected back at you. A little crooked, a little sharp. You touch your own mouth, feel the shape of your teeth. Wonder how your smile will change over time, and who will still recognize it when your hair turns storm-colored. And maybe, you think, the best stories don't always need a perfect narrator, just someone with a voice, a bowl of peanuts, and a little gap for the wind to whistle through. By now the fire's glow is more memory than flame, just a handful of orange coals, pulsing like the last heartbeat of a very old drum. The night is deep, almost velvet. Someone nearby has nodded off, their breath gentle and regular, but the storyteller still wide awake, still smiling like there's one last trick up their sleeve. And tonight, that trick is a gourd. Yes, a gourd. Not magical, not cursed, just peculiar. The story goes like this in a village famous for its corn and its boredom. A farmer named Tawona discovers a strange gourd in his field one morning. He doesn't plant gourds. No one nearby does. It's smooth, glossy, and slightly warm to the touch, like it's been sitting in the sun too long, even though the sky's been overcast all week. He brings it home. His wife, my Tawona, eyes it suspiciously. "Throw it out," she says. "It looks like it knows things." He doesn't. Instead, he places it on a shelf. And that night, it talks, not loudly, not with the mouth, but when Tawona is alone, it murmurs stories, whispered tales, some familiar, some ancient. Some about things no one should know, like who really took the village headman's drum, or what happened to the missing chicken with the fancy feathers. Tawona tells no one. He just listens and writes them down every day. The gourd tells a new story, until one morning, it's gone. Mainstream historical fact in traditional Shona households. Gourds mapudzi weren't just for storing food or drink. They were carved, decorated, and sometimes used in rituals or as symbolic vessels. Some families even passed gourds down across generations, not because they were valuable, but because they had absorbed the rhythm of family stories through years of use. Back in the tale, panic erupts. Tawona searches everywhere. Nothing. The next day, though, a different family in the village finds a similar gourd in their maize basket, and it whispers. Different stories, new secrets. Soon, more gourds appear. Each one speaks, but only once, and only if treated kindly. One gourd sulks for 3 days after being placed next to spoiled beans. Another refuses to talk unless someone sings to it. A third tells only riddles, then rolls away laughing. The village changes. People gather to listen. They build shelves for the gourds, offer them polished stones and flower petals. Someone knits one a tiny hat. But slowly, things start to go wrong. The stories turn sharp. Accusations creep in. One gourd claims a man cheated at the Yam Festival in 1984. Another insists someone kissed the Nanga's apprentice behind the grain silo. Marriages falter. Neighbors glare. The village grows tense. Until one morning, every gourd is gone. Just vanished. All at once. And in their place silence. People wait. Days pass. But the stories don't return. Tawona's notebook, once overflowing, now won't hold ink. A child asks, "Did we say too much?" The elders nod. No, but we listened wrong. Quirky tidbit time in some Shona folktales. Objects that speak, whether gourds, drums, or shadows, don't lie, but they don't tell the whole truth either. They reveal just enough to test the listener. A well-told tale isn't just about what you hear, it's about what you carry after. Historians still debate whether these stories are allegories for gossip, moral erosion, or the danger of knowledge without wisdom. Some say the talking gourd represents oral tradition itself, a voice that depends entirely on how it's received. Others see it as a metaphor for trust once broken. It's not easily restored. In the story, the village eventually recovers. People go back to their gardens, their goats, their arguments about who owns which spoon. But something has changed. Now, when someone tells a story, others listen with more care, less hunger, more curiosity, less judgment. And sometimes, when the wind is just right, someone hears a low chuckle from the corner of a room where nothing is supposed to be. The storyteller finishes the tale with a raised eyebrow. So if you ever find a gourd where one wasn't before, be polite and don't ask stupid questions. Laughter rolls gently around the circle. Someone coughs. A mat shifts. You smile to yourself, imagining a gourd tucked behind your own kitchen pot, muttering jokes or secrets while the rice boils. Would you listen, or would you panic and throw it out with the peelings? And then you wonder how many stories have you lost by not listening the first time above you. The sky is completely still. No wind, no whispers, but you can't help glancing behind you. Just once, just in case. The fire has slipped into a doze now, just a few coals glowing like sleepy eyes under a blanket of ash. The circle around you has quieted, too. Some are gently snoring. Others are half awake, caught in that lovely, syrupy in-between space where stories blur into dreams. But the storyteller still going. As if time itself forgot to tap them on the shoulder, they draw a shape in the dust, just a quick spiral, and say softly, "Before the world was loud, the sky was closer. This is a story about beginnings, not the kind with gods and thunder, but the quiet sort, the kind you feel in your chest, before you ever hear them in your ears. The kind that start with a whisper and end in stars. They say long ago, the sky hung low so low. In fact, that you could reach up and touch it. Not all of it, of course. Just the part that hovered over the fields near the river bend. Children used to jump and pat it like a curtain. Birds flew carefully, and no one dared lie beneath it without offering a greeting. The elders warned that the sky was shy, that if treated poorly, it would rise and stay gone. Naturally, this is exactly what happened. Mainstream historical facts in some Shona creation myths. The sky and earth are described as once being much closer together. This motif appears across multiple Bantu cultures. Often with variations, sometimes it's the sky that leaves, sometimes the earth that rises. The reasons vary, but the result is the same separation of the spiritual and physical worlds, setting the tone for the human condition. In the story, the trouble begins with a song. A boy named Tapiwa, meaning we have been given, starts humming while grinding millet. But it's not an ordinary tune. It's too beautiful, too bold, and most important, too loud. He sings of flying, of sky chasing, of turning into thunder. The other villagers beg him to stop. Sing to the goats if you must, they say, but not to the sky. But Tapiwa can't help it. The song pours out of him like water from a broken gourd. And one morning, the sky hurt, embarrassed then, maybe even jealous rises, just a little, then a little more. By nightfall, it's out of reach. By the next moon, it's distant. And by the end of the season, it's just a ceiling of stars, no longer close enough to speak to. Your quirky tidbit in some rural Zimbabwean traditions. Thunder is believed to be alive, not just a sound, but a spirit's reaction. It's why people sometimes greet thunder with a word, a clapping of hands, or a polite silence, because you're not just hearing weather, you're being heard. In the tale, the village mourns the loss of their low sky. The plants don't grow as sweet. The water feels colder. Even the wind sounds like it's thinking too much. Tapiwa, full of regret, decides to climb the tallest termite mound and sing the sky back down. But now his voice cracks. It's too small. He's just a boy again. So the whole village joins him. They gather and hum softly this time, not with pride, with longing. They sing lullabies, harvest songs, that strange one about the goat with two left feet. Not to command the sky, but to comfort it. And for a moment, just one, the stars shimmer slightly. A breeze rolls through the millet, warmer than before. The sky doesn't return. No, but it listens. Historians still argue whether these sky-rising tales reflect ancient experiences of celestial events, comets, eclipses, climate shifts, or whether they are metaphors for loss of connection with spiritual realms. Some say they explain why the divine feels distant. Others say they are reminders that closeness was once possible. The storyteller doesn't end this tale with a flourish, just a quiet murmur. That's why we look up, not around. When we ask for something big, you sit with that for a while. You tilt your head, slowly, toward the stars. They're all up there, glittering with that cool indifference. But somehow, tonight, they feel just a little closer. Not within reach, but not far either, like they've heard your breathing and decided not to leave entirely. Someone near you clears their throat, another shifts on their mat, but no one speaks. because we're not supposed to be noisy when the sky might still be listening. The fire is almost gone, just the faintest pulse beneath a soft dome of ash. Like a secret, it has no intention of sharing. The night is thick now, full of the warm hush that only comes when everyone knows they've reached the end, even if no one says it. The storyteller rests their hands on their knees and smiles, not because they are done, but because they never really will be. And that, in fact, is the story. This final tale is about a storyteller, just like them, one who traveled from village to village, never staying more than a night, always arriving when the wind changed and the fruit ripened too soon. They never gave a name, just said, "Call me the last," not because they were ending anything, but because they always came at the end of harvests, of seasons, of arguments that had lasted too long. They told strange stories, tales of walking fish, of laughter so strong it split a mountain, of a boy who stole thunder and hid it in a clay pot beneath his bed. But their most famous story was about a story that never ended. It started the way all the others did long ago, very long ago, but it didn't end. Not after an hour, not after a night, not after 3. The listeners tried to stay awake, but eventually, one by one, they drifted off. And in their dreams, the story continued. Each night, the storyteller came back, told the next part and the next, until no one could remember where it began, or whether it had ever really started at all. Mainstream historical fact: in many oral traditions, especially among the Shona, the concept of a never-ending story is tied not to literal endlessness, but to cyclical memory. Stories aren't closed loops, they are living patterns, meant to be revisited, retold, reshaped with each telling. Endings are pauses, invitations to continue. In the tale, the storyteller eventually stops showing up, but by then, everyone in the village knows how to tell the story themselves. They each remember different parts. Some begin in the middle, some add goats that were never there. One elder insists the story was originally about a raincoat, and it doesn't matter, because the story is still alive. Here's your quirky tidbit. In some Shona folktales, there's a figure known as the listener under the ground, a spirit said to live beneath the storytelling circle, absorbing every word. It's said that if a tale is told especially well, you might hear a soft tapping under your mat. That's the listener, asking for more. Back around the fire, the storyteller lets the silence stretch. A few sleepy heads tilt. A yawn is stifled. Then, in a whisper, the story never ends. It only hides in the dust until someone calls it back. And that's it. No thunder, no final proverb. Just a smile and a look around the circle, as if counting the ones still listening, as if passing the story over to you, because now it's yours. The storyteller leans back. The wind lifts gently through the trees. You can hear someone's breathing slow. A child murmurs in their sleep. Somewhere in the dark, a frog starts singing. And above, the stars blink once, twice, still awake, just like you. Now, everything softens. The air around the fire cools. The last embers nestle into themselves like they've done this 1,000 times. The mats shift gently under relaxed limbs. Someone rolls onto their side. Another person sighs into the crook of their elbow. Content, you lie back slowly. The ground familiar beneath you. The sky above is steady now. heavy with stars, but not watching, just resting with you. The stories have all curled up for the night. Every trickster, every moon thief, every girl who whispered to trees, and every grandmother who wove silence into laughter. There's nothing left to follow now, no moral to chase, no ending to interpret, only the lingering presence of something older than memory and softer than sleep. The storyteller no longer speaks, but the hush they left behind hums gently in your chest. It's not silence, it's a rhythm, the same one that started hours ago when the fire first cracked open its mouth and the crickets tuned their legs. The same rhythm that carried each tale from the musasa tree to the millet fields, through laughter, through rain, through footsteps in the dust and gourds that remember. Your body feels heavy now, in the nicest way. Your thoughts are slow and stretched, like honey drizzled over warm bread. The stars do not judge, the past does not call, the future can wait. Let this story, your story, settle like ash in your bones. Let your breath follow the old songs. Let your dreams pick up where the storyteller left off. You've done enough listening. Now it's time to sleep. Close your eyes, slowly. And let the story continue without you, just for now.